Hello scholars, today we're doing Levels of Questions, Part 1. Let's begin by making sure that we have the necessary materials for today. Today we will not be reading from Lupita Mañana, but if you want to have it to reference, that's perfectly acceptable. You want to make sure you have the handout in front of you, titled Levels of Questions, Part 1, with the stairs in the upper right-hand corner. You also will need something to write with today. If you need a hard surface to supplement the table with the computer, please make sure you have that now. As always, make sure that you're following the champs for the computer station so that we can preserve these excellent materials for many students to come. Let's begin by making sure that we have our name on our paper. Please put your first and last name on your assignment. If you are doing this the day of the lesson, today is March 12th, 2014, and please place the English period on your line. Let's begin by reading our objective. Today I am identifying the characteristics of good discussion questions so that I can become better prepared to participate in academic discussions. I know I will have met the objective when I can successfully identify the level of question at least 4 out of 5 times. So today it looks like we are identifying things. Specifically, we are identifying the characteristics of good discussion questions. I know we've spent a lot of time this year talking about academic discussion, so it's probably really important that I know what makes a question good for discussion. At the exit slip, I know I'll need to identify the level of a question 4 out of 5 times. I'm not really sure what they mean by level of question yet, but I think that I'll find that out today. Since I've seen these concepts like academic discourse and questioning, I don't think today I'm a 1, but because I don't know what levels of questions are, I would say that so far I'm a level 2. I'm not confident yet in my ability to complete the objective, but I'm pretty close to a 3. I think as soon as I know levels of questions, I'll be able to do this. Please bubble for yourself what rating you currently are. Now, let's use our editing marks to revise the following sentences. Then we'll write the corrected sentences on the lines below. Here's our first sentence. It's time to lie the napkins on the table. Please pause the video and complete this sentence, making sure you're ready for the corrections. Excellent. Good job. I hope that you spent some really good time thinking about this. Double check your corrections. First of all, we always need to capitalize the first letter of a sentence. Also, this is a contraction. It is time to lie the napkins. So I need an apostrophe here to put that, make sure that it's a correction. It's time to lie is not correct. That's like telling a lie. We lay the napkins on the table in this case. And lastly, we need a period at the end of this sentence to show that our sentence is done. Please spend some time right now writing the sentence correctly on the lines below. Now, let's move on to the second sentence. We would have went to Mountain Lake State Park if it hadn't been so cold. Take some time to make the corrections to the sentence yourself, and then resume the video when you're ready to check them. Great job! Once again, let's begin by capitalizing the first letter of the sentence. We would have. But this is interesting. We've seen this before. Would have sounds like the contraction for would have, but would have is not the proper way to say it. We want to say would have, and we don't want to say went to. In the proper past tense, we say we would have gone. So we would have gone to Mountain Lake State Park is the proper way to do this. Since Mountain Lake State Park is the name of a location that is specific, it needs to be capitalized. It's a proper noun. So we capitalize Mountain, Lake, State, and Park. We would have gone to Mountain Lake State Park if it hadn't been so cold. Once again, I see a contraction that's missing its apostrophe, so I need an apostrophe between the N and the T in hadn't. If it hadn't been so cold. And once again, I conclude with my punctuation. Now, make sure that you have all the corrections correct and that you properly write the sentence on the lines below. Take some time to do that and then resume to check your next answer. Great. Our next question asks us, what is the main idea of the following paragraph? Underline 2 sentences to support 2 supporting details to justify your answer. Follow along as I read this out loud if you haven't done this already. Most animals like company, but it seems they also like to be unique. There are special names for groups of many different animals. For example, a group of fish is called a school. You wouldn't call a group of ants a school, but you could call them a colony. A group of hens is not a colony, however. It is a brood. Then there's a pod of dolphins, a string of ponies, and a gaggle of geese. Right away, I think to myself, well, all of this is about the unique names for animals. I have several examples. For instance, they talk about a group of fish is a school. I also saw they talk about a group of ants is a colony. And I saw another example that says that a group of hens is a brood, a pod of dolphins, and a string of ponies, and a gaggle of geese. That's all they talked about in this passage. So I know that these are all special names for animals. And I find that main idea right here, where it says there are special names for many groups of animals. That's our main idea right there. Notice how if this was the trunk of the tree, each of these would be branches that came off of our tree. Now, let's make sure we've written the main idea on the line here. Please make sure that you have the main idea. There are special names for groups of many different animals. When you're ready to move on, resume the video. Alright, in order to get ready for today's lesson, there are a few key terms that we need to know. These terms are academic, discussion, and question. These are all of the terms that I saw in our objective. Let's take some quick notes about what these words mean. Even though I'm already familiar with them, I want to make sure I'm really solid on what they each mean. So first of all, the word academic means of or relating to schools and education. Let me write that down. Of or relating to schools or education. Make sure that you have this definition. When you're ready for the next one, move on. Now, a discussion specifically is the act of talking about something with another person or a group of people. So I'll write that down. The act of talking about something with a person or group. Make sure you've got this definition before we go on to the next one. Now, question is, that seems like a pretty silly word to be taking the definition of, but in this case, I know what a question is because I use it so often, but I don't think I'd actually be able to describe it to someone. If I did, it would go like this. A sentence, phrase, or word that asks for information or is used to test someone's knowledge. Let me write that. A sentence, phrase, or word that asks for information or is used to test someone's knowledge. All right, make sure you're ready for the next section. Now, today's lesson is all about what makes a good discussion question and what doesn't. So in the space below, we're going to create a double bubble map or compare and contrast thinking map to take notes on the characteristics of good versus bad discussion questions. So good versus bad discussion questions. That's really like the point of this question here. It's what makes a good discussion question, what makes a bad one. So what makes something good to talk about versus not so good for talking about and really going back and forth to make it a conversation. I think that's going to be where a lot of our differences lie. So I'm starting out my double bubble and I'm going to put good questions and then I'm going to put bad questions. So I'm thinking of like, okay, well, first of all, obviously, they're both questions, both good and bad questions. Then I think about like, what else might they have in common or how else might they be similar? I think that they both test people's knowledge. We saw that in the definition of a question. They test people's knowledge. And I think about how they probably both need some kind of evidence to answer. Need evidence or support to answer. Those are things that I think that they have in common. Now, I think about what might they have that's different. Well, I think that a good discussion question, you can go back and forth, like both people can share an opinion. So I would say can have different opinions. Whereas I feel like a question that you wouldn't discuss is something where the answer is really obvious and straightforward. So I'll put obvious answer. I might also put that in a bad discussion question, there's really it's really boring. There's nothing engaging to talk about. So I could say boring for a bad discussion question, whereas a good discussion question might be exciting. Now I don't mean like Disneyland exciting, but exciting to talk about. I also think that a good discussion question will lead you to talk for a while. So talk for a while. Whether it's debating or having the different opinions, a good discussion question would continue to keep going. Whereas I think a bad discussion question, it's all just short answers. So short answers and no real discussion. If there's anything you'd like to add to this circle map, I think that this is a great time to be able to do it. So now what I want to do is write about my bubble map using the butt arc. Here's our directions. Now, using the butt arc and other strategies to summarize the similarities and differences between good and bad discussion questions. You do not need to write a paragraph, but you do need to use complete sentences. Let's think about how we want to complete this. All right. So I might start by just explaining that there are similarities. So I could say both, right? There's our transition words. Good and bad discussion questions. And I'm going to leave this blank for you to fill out. You're looking for something that both good and bad discussions have in common. Go ahead and fill your sentence in if you need this extra support. Now, I'm going to talk about some of the differences. So I'm going to use one of transition questions. So I'd say good discussion questions. And, I'm going to say discussion questions. And I'll give a characteristic. So for instance, I might say good discussion questions can have different opinions. And then I use my butt arc. But bad discussion questions have an obvious answer. So I would write that down here. So good discussion questions blank, but bad discussion questions blank. I could add another difference if I wanted to. That shows me that I'm really being scholarly. When you're ready to move on, please go to part 2 of today's video lesson.